Okay, everybody, this is a review of right triangle trig, which you learned in geometry, but that's okay. We're going to review it anyway. So here we go. On our warm-up, we talked about finding all 6 ratios for angle A. So what I need to do is take a look at sine, cosine, and tangent. We learned last year. Sine is the opposite of hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent to hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. Now what does that all that mean? Well, I went, first of all, to this triangle, and we imagine that it is a lake, a triangular lake, okay? You are standing here. I tell you, so you always start with the angle. So always start with the angle. So I tell you to throw a rock to the opposite side. That's the opposite side. We know the 5 is the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is always opposite the 90. It's also the longest side. Therefore, standing next to us or adjacent to us is the 3. So these are the names of our 3 sides. Okay, so then from here, we are just simply going to set up sine of A. Theta means angle. Sine of A is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of A is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent of A is opposite over adjacent. Okay, now it says all 6, so there's 3 new ones. Now these are ones that we don't use very often. That's cosecant, which is just the flip of this. It's just the hypotenuse over the opposite. Secant, which is the flip of this, which is just going to be hypotenuse over adjacent, and cotangent, which is just the flip of this, which is the adjacent of the opposite. So cosecant of A is 5/4, flip it. Secant of cosine is 5/3, just flip it. And cotangent is just flip it 3/4. That's all we have. So then we go to angle B, and when we go to angle B, things change. Okay, so you walk around from angle A all the way to angle B. You're here now on the lake. You throw a rock to the opposite side. So these names change. So from B, you walk around the other side of the lake. You throw a rock to the opposite side. You have 5 is still the hypotenuse. It's the longest side, opposite the 90. And then you have this side, which is next to you, called the adjacent side. Okay, so then we just did the same thing with our angle B, and we set up all 6 trig ratios. So there they are. 3/5, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of B, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent B is opposite over adjacent. Cosecant is just the flip. So 3/5 is 5/3. Secant is just the flip. So 4/5 is 5/4. And cotangent is just the flip. So 3/4 is 4/3. Okay, then after the warm-up, we went into how do you use right triangle trig. So we went and we took a look at our notes. So here's my question. We started with this particular triangle here, okay? And what's in red we already solved, but told the kids first, easiest thing to find out of this triangle DOG, is this angle G, because we know these 2 angles must add up to 90, okay? So we just subtract from 90, and angle G is 59 degrees, okay? That's the easiest. Now, the next piece of this is we have to either find this side here, little o, or this side, little g. So we decided to find little o. We're going to use our hypotenuse because we know our 14, and we're going to find little o, which is our opposite. So opposite hypotenuse we know from our notes. Opposite hypotenuse is sine. So I'm going to set it up as opposite hypotenuse sine. So I said sine, theta is the angle. Sine of 31, that's my angle, equals my opposite over my hypotenuse, over 14. So then to solve, I multiply both sides by 14. I use my calculator. Now be careful. I'm going to go 14 sine of 31. Be careful of what we call the mode, because in your calculator there are 2 ways to describe angles. One is radians, the other is degrees. We must be in degree mode, otherwise we're going to get the wrong answers. So then I multiply by 14. I just use my calculator. 14 sine of 31. I got a 7.2. Okay. Now then we want to find side G, which is my adjacent side. So I set up cosine instead, adjacent of hypotenuse. So I set cosine of 31 degrees is equal to my adjacent side, which is G, over 14, which is my hypotenuse. Multiply by 14. I use my calculator, and I got about 12. Okay. Second example we talked about is if you don't know the angle. So we said if you don't know the angle, if you don't know the angle, you're going to find it using the inverse button. Okay. The inverse button are on your calculator right here in blue. Sine inverse, find an angle. Cosine inverse, find an angle. Tangent inverse, find an angle. So here's our example. We've got triangle CAT. We have This side is given as B8. This side is given to be 10. I said pick an angle, so they picked angle T. So you always start with the angle. Okay, what do I know? I know the opposite side and the adjacent. Opposite adjacent has to be tangent. We know that's tangent because opposite of adjacent. Tangent of T, we don't know the angle. Tangent of T is my opposite over my adjacent. Well, what I have to do is use my inverse button, okay? So to find angle T, I use tan inverse, which is this blue button. So I'm going to go tan inverse. To find the angle, you hit the inverse button of 8 over 10. Of 8 divided by 10, and then I get my angle. It's about 38.66, okay? Great. So then, once we get this angle, we can find the other from 90 degrees. Now, these two angles have to add up to 90, so I just went 90 degrees minus my 38.66, and I got an answer about 51.34, okay? So finally, how do I find this third side? Well, I could use sine, I could use cosine, but we chose to use Pythagoras theorem because I've got 2 of the 3 sides. So we went 8 squared plus 10 squared equals a squared, 64 plus 100, 164, square root of 164 is about 12.8. You could do it using sine or cosine, but we just chose Pythagoras theorem. So if you know 2 sides, you can always find the third side by Pythagoras theorem. And then finally, we had a little story problem. Okay, we've got a 6-foot man, cites the angle of elevation to the top of a tree to be about 65 degrees. How tall is the tree? So here's my tree, and again, nothing's drawn in perspective. Here's my tree trunk. Again, it's not drawn to scale. So here's my angle of elevation, 65 degrees. My tree is my opposite. 100 feet is my adjacent. I'll add the 6 in when I'm done. Again, it's not drawn to perspective. So opposite adjacent is tangent. Tangent 65 is equal to h over 100. Opposite over adjacent. To solve for h, I multiply by 100. I use my calculator. 100 tangent 65. I get about 214.45 feet. That's from here to here because that's where my triangle rests. I add the 6 feet in. I got about 219.45 feet. Okay, that's all I have. If you have any questions, come see me.